The silence in the house was not empty, it was heavy with memory. For 75-year-old Mathew, the silence was a companion he had grown to respect over the last 3 years, ever since Martha had passed. He sat in his favorite armchair, the leather worn smooth and cracked in a pattern that resembled a dry riverbed. The afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Gold dust, Martha used to call it. The house, a sprawling 2-story Victorian craftsman on the edge of town, was his masterpiece. He hadn't just bought it, he had restored it. Every banister, every baseboard, every cabinet in the kitchen had been sanded, stained, and installed by his own hands 40 years ago. It smelled of lemon oil, old paper, and the faint, lingering scent of the lavender potpourri Martha used to keep in the foyer. Mathew took a sip of his tea, Earl Grey, hot, no sugar. His hands trembled slightly, a tremor that had developed recently, not from fear, but from the simple wear and tear of a life spent working with heavy machinery. He was looking at the large oak tree in the backyard through the French doors. He and Jason, his son, had built a treehouse there 30 years ago. The peace was shattered by the crunch of gravel in the driveway. It wasn't the slow, respectful roll of the mail carrier. It was aggressive. Fast. The screech of brakes followed. Mathew set his cup down on the coaster, always the coaster, and adjusted his spectacles. He wasn't expecting anyone. He pushed himself up, his knees popping audibly, and made his way to the front door. Before he could touch the brass handle, the door swung open. "Dad, you're home!" It was Jason. His son looked older than the last time Mathew had seen him, which was Christmas 5 months ago. Jason's hairline was receding, and there was a frantic, sweaty sheen to his forehead. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but fit poorly, straining at the buttons. Behind him trailed Brenda, Jason's wife, and Tyler, their 19-year-old son. Brenda was scrolling on her phone, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. Click, 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 a sound that instantly set Mathew's teeth on edge. Tyler didn't look up. He had large headphones over his ears and was chewing gum with an open mouth. "Jason," Mathew said, a smile naturally forming despite the intrusion. He reached out to hug his son. "I didn't know you were coming. Is everything all right?" Jason hugged him back, but the embrace was stiff, brief. He patted Mathew's back a little too hard. "Everything is... well, we need to talk, Dad. But first, let's get inside. It's scorching out there." Brenda finally looked up, her eyes scanning the hallway. She didn't look at Mathew, she looked at the house. Her eyes darted to the antique grandfather clock, then to the oil painting of the coastline, then to the crystal chandelier. It was an appraising look, a calculator behind the eyes. "Smells like old people in here." Tyler muttered, sliding his headphones down to his neck. "Tyler, be nice," Brenda said, though her tone lacked any real reprimand. She turned to Mathew, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Mathew. You're looking sturdy." "Hello, Brenda." "Tyler," Mathew nodded to them. "Come in. I can put a pot of fresh tea on." "No tea," Jason said quickly, ushering everyone into the living room. "Sit down, Dad." Mathew sat. He felt suddenly small in his own home. Jason paced in front of the fireplace, wiping sweat from his brow. Brenda sat on the sofa, crossing her legs and picking at a loose thread on a throw pillow, a pillow Martha had embroidered. Mathew wanted to ask her to stop, but he held his tongue. "So," Jason began, loosening his tie. "Here's the thing. The business, the market has been brutal. Just brutal. We've hit a bit of a rough patch." Mathew leaned forward, concern etching his face. "Do you need a loan, son?" "I have some savings." No, not a loan," Jason interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "It's bigger than that. We lost the house in the city." Mathew froze. "You lost your home?" "Foreclosure." Brenda interjected, her voice sharp. "Because Jason trusted the wrong partners. But that's in the past. We need a solution for now." Jason stopped pacing and looked at his father. "We have nowhere to go, Dad. And we were thinking, this place is huge. It's just you here. You're rattling around in 4,000 square feet. It's dangerous, really. What if you fell? What if you had a heart attack?" "I'm perfectly healthy," Mathew said softly. "For now," Brenda said ominously. "But at 75, things change overnight. We discussed it, and we think it's best if we move in. For your sake, we can take care of you, manage the property, make sure you're eating right. And in exchange, we have a roof over our heads until Jason gets back on his feet." Mathew looked from Jason to Brenda. He saw the desperation in his son's eyes, but he saw something else in Brenda's. Opportunity. "Move in," Mathew repeated. "All 3 of you." "Tyler needs the guest room," Brenda said, pulling out a mental list. "Jason and I can take the guest suite downstairs. We won't be in your way. It'll be like we're not even here." Mathew looked at the pictures on the mantel. Photos of Jason as a boy. This was his son. his flesh and blood. How could he say no? Of course, Mathew sighed, feeling a heavy weight settle in his chest. Family helps family. You can stay as long as you need. Jason exhaled, a massive release of tension. Thank you, Dad. You won't regret this. Brenda stood up immediately. Great. The movers are 5 minutes away. We brought the truck. Mathew blinked. You already brought the truck. Optimism, Mathew. Brenda said, walking toward the kitchen. I'm going to check the pantry. I hope you don't have any of that processed junk. I'm putting us all on a keto diet starting tonight. As Brenda marched into his kitchen, Martha's kitchen, and began opening and slamming cabinets, Mathew looked at Jason. Jason looked away, unable to meet his father's gaze. It's just for a little while, Dad, Jason whispered. But as the heavy thud of moving boxes began to echo through the hallway 10 minutes later, Mathew knew, deep in his gut, that little while was a lie. The invasion had begun. 3 weeks later, the house was unrecognizable. The scent of lavender and lemon oil was gone, replaced by the sharp, chemical smell of Brenda's intense cleaning products and the lingering odor of Tyler's body spray, which seemed to permeate the upholstery. The silence was gone, too. The television in the living room was always on, blaring reality shows or news at high volume. Tyler's video games echoed from the guest room upstairs, the sounds of virtual gunfire and explosions shaking the ceiling fixtures. Mathew felt like a ghost in his own life. He tried to maintain his routine. Morning coffee in the garden, reading the paper. But it was constantly disrupted. Mathew! Brenda's voice cut through the morning air. He was in the garden, tending to his prize-winning roses. He lowered his shears and turned. Brenda was standing on the back porch, hands on her hips. I need to talk to you about the master bedroom, she shouted. Mathew walked slowly back to the house. What about it? It's the stairs, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. I've been watching you climb them. You're breathless by the time you reach the top. It's a liability. I have climbed those stairs for 40 years, Brenda. I am fine. Jason agrees with me, she said, playing her ace card. We're worried. If you fall in the middle of the night trying to get to the bathroom, well, we'd never forgive ourselves. Plus, the master bath has that walk and tub you never use. It's wasteful. Mathew wiped his hands on his trousers. What are you suggesting? The attic room, she said. Mathew recoiled. The servants' quarters. That room hasn't been used since the 1920s. It's unfinished. It's freezing in the winter and an oven in the summer. Jason put a space heater up there this morning, Brenda said breezily. And we bought a portable AC unit. Look, Mathew, it's just logical. It's on the 3rd floor, yes, but it's smaller. Easier for you to keep clean. Jason and I need the master suite. We have all our business files, and I need the space for my yoga. The guest suite downstairs is just too dark for my mental health. You want me to move out of the room I shared with my wife? Mathew's voice shook. The bed, I built that headboard. We'll move the bed up, she said, checking her nails. Though honestly, that bed is massive. A twin would fit better in the attic, give you more floor space. Mathew walked past her into the kitchen, looking for Jason. He found his son eating a sandwich, staring at his laptop. Jason, Mathew said, his voice firm. Brenda wants to move me to the attic. Jason chewed slowly, not looking up. She thinks it's safer, Dad. Safer? It's another flight of stairs up. How is that safer? Jason finally looked up, his eyes tired and hollow. It's just, Brenda isn't sleeping well downstairs. She hears the traffic. She's stressed, Dad. If she's stressed, the whole house is miserable. Please, just do this for me. Just until we get back on our feet. You're asking me to give up my sanctuary, Mathew whispered. It's just a room, Dad. Jason snapped, a flash of irritation breaking through. God, why do you have to be so difficult about everything? We're here taking care of you, cooking your meals, and you act like we're torturing you. Mathew went silent. He looked at his son. Really looked at him. He saw a man who had been beaten down by life and was now taking the path of least resistance, even if it meant crushing his own father. Fine, Mathew said. The word was barely audible. The move happened that afternoon. They didn't hire movers this time. Jason and Tyler shoved Mathew's clothes into black trash bags. Easier to carry, Brenda said. They couldn't fit the hand-carved king-sized bed frame up the narrow attic stairs. We'll store it in the garage. Jason grunted, sweating as he hauled a cheap metal twin-bed frame up to the attic. By evening, Mathew was sitting on the edge of a lumpy mattress in the small, slanted room under the eaves. The single window was small and covered in grime. The floorboards were bare plywood. It smelled of stale dust and insulation. He looked around. His life had been compressed into a 10 by 10 box. His dresser wouldn't fit, so his clothes were still in the trash bags on the floor. Downstairs he could hear laughter. Brenda had opened a bottle of wine. He heard the clink of glasses. Finally, he heard Brenda's voice drift up through the floorboards. Room to breathe. Mathew turned off the single lamp on the bedside table. He lay down in the darkness, pulling the thin quilt up to his chin. He didn't cry. He just stared at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, feeling the cold seep into his bones. He realized then that he wasn't a guest in his own home. He was a prisoner. 2 months passed. Mathew had become a shadow. He spent most of his time in the attic or the garden, avoiding the common areas where Brenda reigned supreme. He had learned to be quiet. He wore soft slippers. He knew which floorboards creaked. He knew that if he entered the kitchen while Brenda was cooking, she would huff and slam pans, muttering about too many cooks. So he ate sandwiches in his room or waited until they had finished dinner to scrounge for leftovers. It was a Tuesday morning when the breaking point arrived. Mathew had gone out early to the pharmacy to pick up his blood pressure medication. When he returned, the house was unusually active. A white van was parked in the driveway. "Junk Be Gone" was painted on the side. Panic flared in Mathew's chest. He hurried up the walkway as fast as his legs would carry him. The front door was propped open. 2 burly men were hauling a large sofa out the door, his sofa. The Chesterfield leather sofa he and Martha had bought in London for their 25th anniversary. "Hey!" Mathew shouted, dropping his pharmacy bag. "What did that down?" The movers paused, looking confused. Brenda stepped out onto the porch, holding a clipboard. She looked annoyed. "Mathew, calm down. You're making a scene," she hissed. "That is my sofa." Mathew pointed a shaking finger. "Where are they taking it?"
"It's rotting, Mathew."
Brenda lied smoothly. "The leather is cracked. It smells, and it's full of dust mites. I'm doing you a favor. I ordered a beautiful new sectional, modern, beige. It'll brighten up the room." "I didn't say you could throw away my furniture!" "It's our living space now, Dad." Jason appeared in the doorway looking sheepish. "Brenda just wants to make it nice. We need to modernize if we want to, live comfortably." "Stop them," Mathew pleaded, looking at Jason. "Jason, that's where your mother sat every Christmas morning." Jason looked at Brenda. Brenda raised an eyebrow, a silent challenge. Jason looked down at his shoes. "Let it go, Dad. It's just stuff." Mathew watched, helpless, as the movers shoved the sofa into the back of the crusher truck. He heard the wood frame crack as the compactor activated. It sounded like a bone breaking. Defeated, Mathew walked past them into the house. The hallway was lined with black garbage bags. "What is all this?" Mathew asked, his voice hollow. "Just decluttering," Brenda called out from the porch, clearing out the junk from the study and the master closet, old papers, moth-eaten clothes. The Mathew froze. The master closet. Martha's things. He fell to his knees beside one of the bags. He ripped the plastic open. Inside were Martha's dresses, her floral Sunday dress, her gardening coat. And at the bottom, Mathew pulled out a silver picture frame. It was the photo from their wedding day. The glass was shattered. A jagged crack ran right through Martha's smiling face. He held the broken frame, his thumb tracing the fracture. A shard of glass sliced his finger, and a drop of bright red blood fell onto the black and white photo. "Oops," Tyler said, walking by with a bag of chips. "Yeah, Mom dropped that box." Said it was trash anyway. Mathew didn't respond. He couldn't speak. The grief that washed over him was so intense it felt like drowning. But as he stared at the blood on the photo, the grief began to curdle. It heated up. It transformed. He stood up, clutching the broken frame to his chest. He didn't go to the kitchen to confront them. He didn't scream. He walked silently toward the back stairs. As he reached the landing, he heard Brenda and Jason in the kitchen. They didn't know he was there. He paused, pressing himself against the wall, becoming the silent grandfather they thought he was. "He's losing it, Jason." Brenda's voice was clear. "Crying over old furniture. He's senile. We need to get that power of attorney signed fast." "I don't know, Brent." Jason sounded weak. "He seems pretty sharp sometimes. He's 75 and emotional." Brenda scoffed. "Look, we get him to sign the papers over for his medical management. Once we have control of the assets, we can sell this place. The market is hot. We can get $1 million for this dump if we renovate. We put him in that nice assisted living facility on the other side of town, the one that takes Medicare, and we take the equity to start over in Florida." "He loves this house," Jason said. "He won't remember it in a year." Brenda replied coldly. "Do you want to be broke forever? Or do you want to be a winner? He's had his time. It's our turn." There was a silence. Then Jason spoke. "Okay. Draw up the papers. We'll do it at his birthday dinner next week." Mathew stood on the stairs, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. The tears in his eyes dried up. The trembling in his hands stopped. They thought he was senile. They thought he was weak. They thought he was a stepping stone to their future. Mathew looked down at the broken picture of Martha. I'm sorry I let them in, my love, he thought. But I promise you they will not win. He turned and walked up to his cold attic room. He didn't turn on the light. He sat at his small desk, pulled out a notepad and a pen, and for the first time in months, Mathew smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a master carpenter who just realized exactly how to dismantle a structure, piece by piece. The morning after the broken picture frame, Mathew underwent a transformation. It wasn't physical. He still wore his beige cardigan, his orthopedic slippers, and his reading glasses on a chain, but internal. The man who had pleaded for his sofa was gone. In his place was a man who watched. He adopted a shuffle. He deliberately took longer to answer questions. When Brenda spoke to him, he would stare at her chin for a few seconds before responding, creating an air of vacuity. Mathew, did you eat the last yogurt? Brenda asked one morning, tapping her foot. Mathew blinked slowly, looking at the refrigerator, then at the window. The birds, he murmured. The birds are quite loud today? Brenda rolled her eyes and turned to Jason. He's gone. Totally gone. It's a mercy, really. What we're planning. Mathew wasn't gone. He was sharper than he had been in 20 years. His routine changed. He began taking long walks for his health. Doctor's orders, he told Jason. They didn't care. As long as he was out of the house, they were happy. But Mathew wasn't walking to the park. He was walking 3 blocks over to the bus stop. He took the number 12 bus downtown, a 40-minute ride to a brick building with a brass plaque, Henderson and Associates, Estate Law. Arthur Henderson was 80 years old, retired from the bench, but he kept a small office for special cases. He and Mathew had played chess every Thursday for 15 years until Brenda moved in and canceled chess night because she needed the living room for her Pilates Zoom class. Mathew, Arthur said, leaning back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. He listened to the entire story without interrupting. He looked at the photos Mathew had taken on his flip phone. The trash bags, the broken frame, the new locks on the master bedroom door. They want power of attorney, Mathew said, his voice steady. I heard them. They plan to sell the house, put me in a state facility, and take the equity to Florida. Arthur's eyes narrowed behind his thick glasses. Greed is a common affliction, old friend. But in this case, it appears to be terminal. Do you want to evict them? If I evict them now, Mathew said, Jason will fight it. He'll say I'm incompetent. Brenda will drag it out. They'll claim squatters' rights or say they put money into the house. I don't just want them out. Arthur, I want to ensure they can never come back. And I want Jason to learn. I want him to feel the weight of his weakness. Arthur smiled, a dry, terrifying smile. Then we don't fight them. We let them think they've won. We let them walk right into the cage and lock the door themselves. They spent the next 3 hours drafting documents. Not the standard boilerplate forms. These were masterpieces of legal linguistic traps. You need to be invisible, Arthur warned as Mathew stood to leave. If they suspect you are lucid, they will accelerate the process or force you into a home immediately. You must be the silent grandfather. Don't worry, Mathew said, putting on his hat. I've been practicing. When Mathew returned home, the house was chaotic. Tyler had friends over. 3 teenagers with muddy shoes on the coffee table. The music was thumping so hard the windows rattled. Yo, Grandpa! Tyler shouted over the bass. We need cash for pizza. Mom's not here. And Mathew looked at the muddy boots on his hardwood floor. He felt a spike of rage, but he suffocated it instantly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. Here you go. Billy, Mathew said, deliberately using the wrong name. It's Tyler, you old bat. The grandson laughed, snatching the money. Whatever, thanks. Mathew shuffled away, heading for the stairs. He paused on the landing. He could hear them mocking him. Dude, your grandpa is totally out of it.
Yeah, Tyler bragged.
But he's loaded. Once he kicks the bucket, or Mom puts him away, I'm getting a Tesla. Mathew climbed the stairs to his attic, sat on his lumpy twin bed, and opened his diary. He wrote down the date, the time, and the quote. I'm getting a Tesla. He placed the diary under the loose floorboard beneath the bed. The evidence was mounting. The invitation was ostensibly for Mathew's 76th birthday. In reality, it was Brenda's debut in a ball as the lady of the manor. She had invited 30 people. Her friends, Jason's failed business partners, and a few neighbors she was trying to impress. She had catered the event with expensive hors d'oeuvres, lobster sliders, truffle tartlets, champagne. Mathew came downstairs wearing his best suit, the one he wore to church. It hung a little loose on him now. The stress of the attic living had shed 10 pounds from his frame. Oh, look at you! Brenda shrieked as he entered the kitchen. She was wearing a red silk dress that cost more than Matthew's monthly pension check. Doesn't he look adorable, like a little doll? She didn't hug him. She adjusted his tie, frowned, and patted his cheek condescendingly. No, Mathew, tonight is a big night. Try not to wander. Just sit in the wingback chair. We'll bring you cake. The party was a blur of noise. Mathew sat in the corner, clutching a glass of sparkling water. People he didn't know swirled around him, drinking his wine, eating his food, admiring his home. You've done wonders with the place. Brenda, a woman with excessive jewelry, cooed. It used to be so drab. Oh, I know. Brenda laughed, clinking glasses. We're still in phase 1. We're planning to knock out this wall here. She gestured to the main load-bearing wall of the house, to open up the flow. An open concept chef's kitchen. Mathew winced internally. Knock out that wall, and the second floor collapses, he thought. But let her dream. Jason was by the bar drinking heavily. He looked nervous. Every time he made eye contact with Mathew, he looked away. Hey, old-timer. A man in a shiny suit approached Mathew. It was one of Jason's partners. Here you're moving on to greener pastures soon. Assisted living, right? Smart move. Let the young blood handle the real estate. Mathew looked up, his eyes watery and vague. I like the garden, he stammered. The man laughed and patted Mathew's shoulder. Sure you do, Pop. Sure you do. Later in the evening, Brenda clinked a spoon against her champagne flute. The room went quiet. I just want to make a toast, she announced, beaming. To family, and to new beginnings. Jason and I have had a hard year, but looking around this beautiful home, surrounded by friends, I know our luck has turned. We are so blessed to be the stewards of this legacy. She didn't mention Mathew. Not once. It was his birthday party, but his name wasn't spoken. There was no cake for him. The cake on the table said, The future is bright. In icing, Mathew watched them. He watched Brenda preening. He watched Jason chugging his drink to drown his conscience. He watched Tyler stealing wine bottles to sneak out to his friends. They were celebrating a victory they hadn't won yet. Brenda walked over to Mathew, flushed with alcohol and triumph. She leaned down, her perfume overpowering. Tomorrow morning, Mathew, she whispered, her voice low and hard. We have the notary coming at 10 a.m. We're going to sign the papers to get you that special care insurance. Don't make a fuss. Do it for Jason. Mathew looked at her. He saw the greed naked in her eyes. It was ugly. For Jason, Mathew repeated softly. Good boy, she said. She walked away to rejoin the party. Mathew set his glass down. He stood up unnoticed and walked to the hallway. He looked at the spot where the broken picture frame had been. Happy birthday, Mathew, he thought. Tomorrow, you give them their gift. The morning sun was brutal, exposing the debris of the party. The living room was littered with napkins, half-empty glasses, and plates of hardened cheese. Mathew was up at 6:00 a.m. He dressed impeccably. He shaved. He packed a small suitcase and hid it in the downstairs coat closet beneath a pile of winter coats. At 9:05 a.m. the notary arrived, a small, anxious woman named Miss Perkins. Brenda and Jason were seated at the dining room table. They looked hungover. Brenda was wearing dark sunglasses inside. Jason was drinking black coffee, his hand shaking. Mathew, sit, Brenda commanded, pointing to the chair at the head of the table. Mathew sat. Okay, Jason said, clearing his throat. Ms. Perkins is here to witness the signatures. These are the papers we talked about, Dad, the management forms. He slid a thick stack of documents toward Mathew. The title page read to you our bel pub or FAT in bold letters. It just lets us pay your bills, Dad, Jason lied, his voice cracking. And make medical decisions if you can't. Mathew put on his reading glasses. He picked up the pen. His hand hovered over the paper. He trembled violently, a performance he had perfected. I don't have my reading light, Mathew mumbled. It's dark. It's fine, Mathew. Just sign where the sticker is. Brenda snapped, lifting her sunglasses. I need water, Mathew said. He reached for the pitcher of water on the table with a shaking hand. Dad, be careful. Jason started. Splash. Mathew knocked the pitcher over. Ice water flooded the table, soaking the documents instantly. The ink on the cheap printer paper began to bleed. Oh my God! Brenda shrieked, jumping back. You clumsy idiot! Look what you did! I'm sorry, Mathew wailed, grabbing napkins and dabbing uselessly at the sodden mess. I ruined it. Those were the originals, Jason groaned. We have to print them again. The printer is out of ink, Brenda. I told you to buy cartridges. I have spares, Mathew said softly. The room froze. What? Brenda asked. Mathew reached into his cardigan pocket. Mr. Henderson, he sent me copies. Last week, when we talked about the nursing home, he pulled out a crisp, dry folder. He said I should keep a copy. Is this the same one? Brenda snatched the folder. She flipped through it rapidly. Standard durable power of attorney. Property management clause. Medical directive. She scanned the text. It looked identical to the one she had downloaded from a legal website. The font was the same. The headers were the same. Yeah, Brenda said, relieved. Yeah, this is it. Thank God you hoarded this, Mathew. She didn't read the fine print on page 4. She didn't notice that Article 7, Section C, the revocation clause, was worded differently. And she certainly didn't notice the Exhibit A attached to the back, which referenced a specific trust instrument dated 2 days prior. Okay, let's go. Sign it before you spill something else, Brenda ordered. Mathew signed. His signature was shaky but legible. Now you, Jason, Miss Perkins said. Jason signed. Brenda signed as the secondary agent. Perkins stamped it. Clunk, clunk. The sound echoed like a gavel. Brenda exhaled a long serpentine hiss of satisfaction. She picked up the signed document and held it to her chest. Don't, she whispered. She looked at Mathew, and for the first time, the mask dropped completely. She didn't smile, she sneered. Well, that's that. Jason, call the facility. Tell them we can move him in on Monday. I want the attic cleared out by Tuesday so we can start the renovations. Mathew looked at Jason. Monday. But Jason couldn't look at him. It's for the best. Dad, they have doctors there. But the house, Mathew said, acting confused. It's not your house anymore, Mathew, Brenda said, standing up and smoothing her dress. Legally, we're in charge now. You're just a guest. And your reservation has expired. She walked out of the room, laughing. Mathew sat still. He looked at the water dripping off the edge of the table. He had signed the power of attorney, yes. But the document they had just signed acknowledged the existence of the Mathew J. Harrison Irrevocable Living Trust. By signing it, they had legally acknowledged that the house was no longer Mathew's property to give. It belonged to the trust. And the trustee of that trust was not Jason and not Brenda. It was Arthur Henderson. Furthermore, the document contained a bad boy clause. By attempting to use the power of attorney to sell trust assets, which they would try to do immediately, they would trigger an automatic removal from the will entirely. Mathew stood up slowly. He didn't shake. He walked to the window and looked out at the oak tree. Monday, he whispered to himself. Yes, Monday will be a very interesting day. Sunday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. Inside the house, however, the atmosphere was electric with greed. Brenda was already awake at 700 a.m., pacing the living room with a tape measure. She was on the phone with a contractor. Yes, the entire wall. I want it gone by Wednesday, she barked into her mobile. Don't worry about permits, I have power of attorney. I am the decision maker now. Just bring the sledgehammers. Jason was at the kitchen table, scrolling through listings for luxury condos in Florida. Check this one, Bren. Ocean View. $2 million. If we sell this place for 1.2 and liquidate Dad's savings, we can put down a massive deposit. Book a viewing. Brenda called out, snapping the tape measure retract button aggressively. We're rich, baby. Mathew sat on the back porch, sipping his Earl Grey tea. He was fully dressed in his Sunday best. A charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and a tie with a subtle paisley pattern. His suitcase was sitting beside him, hidden from the view of the French doors. He checked his watch, 10:00 a.m., right on time. A sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. It wasn't a taxi. It was a Lincoln Town car. Behind it, a police cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing silently. Brenda stopped measuring. She ran to the window. Who is that? Why are the cops here? Jason stood up, panic flaring in his eyes. Did something happen? Did Tyler do something? The doorbell rang. Get the door, Mathew! Brenda shouted instinctively, before remembering her new status. Never mind. I'll handle it. It's probably a mistake. She threw open the front door. Standing there was Arthur Henderson. He was wearing a three-piece suit and leaning on an ebony cane. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers and a man holding a video camera. Can I help you? Brenda asked, her voice sharp. We're busy. Good morning, Mrs. Harrison, Arthur said, his voice like gravel. I am Arthur Henderson. I believe we have met. I am Mathew's attorney? Oh, Brenda scoffed. Well, you're a little late. We have power of attorney now. We handle Mathew's affairs. If he owes you legal fees, send us a bill. I'm not here for fees, Arthur said, stepping past her into the foyer without invitation. The officers followed. I am here to conduct a property inspection on behalf of the trust. Brenda froze. The what? Jason ran into the hallway. Mr. Henderson, what's going on? Mathew walked in from the back porch. He stood quietly by the grandfather clock. He didn't look frail anymore. He stood tall, his hands clasped behind his back. Arthur pulled a document from his briefcase. Yesterday, you both signed a document acknowledging the Mathew J. Harrison Irrevocable Living Trust. By signing as witnesses and agents, you legally certified that you understood the terms. We signed a power of attorney! Brenda shrieked. Which referenced the trust as the governing instrument for all real estate assets, Arthur corrected calmly. This house was transferred into that trust 3 days ago. Mathew no longer owns it. The trust owns it, and I am the sole trustee. Jason turned pale. What does that mean? It means, Mathew spoke up, his voice clear and strong, interrupting the lawyer. It means you can't sell it. You can't mortgage it, and you certainly cannot knock down any walls. Brenda whirled on him, her face twisting into a mask of rage. You senile old bat! You tricked us! It doesn't matter! We have power of attorney over you! We can still put you in the home and fight this trust in court. Arthur chuckled darkly. I was hoping you would say that. Officer. One of the police officers stepped forward. Ma'am, we have a report of elder abuse, financial coercion, and theft. That's a lie! Brenda screamed. Arthur held up a USB drive. Mathew has been documenting everything for months. The move to the uninsulated attic. The destruction of his personal property, specifically the furniture and the heirloom picture frame. The verbal abuse, the withholding of food, and yesterday, the coercion to sign legal documents under duress. Duress, Jason stammered. We didn't force him. Why have a recording? Arthur lied smoothly. Or maybe he didn't, Brenda didn't know. But more importantly, the trust has a bad boy clause. Section 9, paragraph 4, Arthur opened the file and read aloud. Any beneficiary who attempts to involuntarily commit the grantor to a medical facility while the grantor is deemed mentally competent by his primary physician, or who attempts to sell the primary residence against the grantor's wishes, shall be immediately disinherited and removed from the property. Arthur snapped the folder shut. Mathew had a mental competency evaluation last week. He scored a perfect 30 out of 30. He is not senile. He was acting. The silence that followed was absolute. Tyler had come downstairs, holding his gaming controller, watching with his mouth open. So, Jason whispered. We don't get the money. You don't get a dime, Mathew said. And you don't get the house. You can't kick us out, Brenda yelled, lunging toward Mathew. The officer stepped in between them, hand on his belt. Mum, step back, the officer warned. This is our home. We have rights. Actually, Arthur said, checking his watch, since you are not tenants, you pay no rent, and you are not owners, you are technically guests. And the trustee has revoked your invitation. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate the premises before we press charges for trespassing. 1 hour. Jason fell to his knees. Dad, please. We have nowhere to go. We lost the city house. We're bankrupt. Mathew looked down at his son. There was no joy in his eyes, only a deep, resounding sadness. I know, Jason. I was willing to help you. I let you in. I would have let you stay forever if you had treated me with even an ounce of decency. But you didn't want a father. You wanted an ATM that died quickly. I'm sorry, Jason sobbed, grabbing Mathew's pant leg. I'm sorry, Dad. It was the stress. I didn't mean it. You stood by while your wife threw away your mother's wedding photo, Mathew said coldly, pulling his leg away. That wasn't stress, Jason. That was cowardice. Mathew turned to Arthur. I'll wait in the car. Dad, no, Jason screamed. Mathew walked out the front door, the sound of Brenda's hysterical screaming fading behind him. He didn't look back. The Lincoln Town car was quiet and smelled of leather and mints. Mathew sat in the back seat watching the house through the tinted window. He saw the flurry of activity. Officers standing guard. Jason and Brenda running back and forth with trash bags. The same trash bags they had forced him to use. Stuffing their clothes into them. He saw Tyler carrying his PlayStation, looking terrified. It took them 50 minutes. They piled everything into their SUV. There was no room for Brenda's vanity table or the new big screen TV they had bought on credit. They left them on the lawn. As they backed out of the driveway, Jason looked at the black car. He couldn't see Mathew through the tint, but he knew he was there. Jason looked broken. A man who had gambled his soul for a shortcut and lost everything. Brenda was in the passenger seat, aggressively gesturing, blaming Jason, blaming the world, blaming everyone but herself. The SUV disappeared down the street. They're gone, sir, the driver said. Arthur opened the back door and slid in beside Mathew. It's done. The locks will be changed within the hour. The cleaning crew is coming tomorrow to restore the master bedroom. Mathew nodded slowly. He felt lighter, but also hollow. It's strange, Arthur. I thought I would feel triumphant. I just feel tired. That's the price of war, Mathew, Arthur said gently. Even the winter bleeds. But you kept your dignity, and you protected Martha's legacy. Where will they go? Mathew asked. A motel, likely. Then perhaps Brenda's parents. It will be a hard road, but it is the road they paved for themselves. Arthur tapped the partition. Driver, take us to the secondary location. The car glided away. They didn't go back to the big empty house. Mathew couldn't bear the silence there just yet. Instead, They drove 20 miles out of town to a gated community near the lake. Silver Leaf Estates. The car pulled up to a small, charming cottage with a wrap-around porch and a view of the water. Flower baskets hung from the eaves. It was small, perfect for one person. "I bought this under the trust's name last month," Arthur explained. "Just in case you wanted a fresh start. We can rent out the big house. The income will pay for your lifestyle here and keep the trust growing." The Mathew stepped out. The air smelled of pine and water. It was peaceful. He walked up the steps and sat in a rocking chair that was already waiting there. He looked out at the lake, the sun dancing on the ripples. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the broken silver picture frame. He had glued it back together the night before. The crack was still visible, running through the glass, a scar across the memory. He set the picture on the small table beside the rocker.
"We're safe now, Martha," he whispered to the photo.
"We're safe." Mathew closed his eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, he wasn't the silent grandfather. He was just Mathew. And he was free, more or less son. And that is how the silent grandfather checkmated his own family. But let's dig deeper. Why did this happen? The psychology here is terrifying because it's so common. Look at Brenda. She displays classic narcissistic entitlement. To her, Mathew wasn't a human being with a history and feelings. He was an asset to be liquidated. She projected her own failures onto him, calling him a burden, while she lived off his resources. Her fatal mistake. Underestimation. She assumed that because Mathew was old and quiet, he was stupid. She mistook his silence for submission. And then there's Jason, the enabler. Jason is perhaps more tragic than Brenda. He loved his father, but he loved his comfort more. He allowed his guilt to be overruled by his greed. He let his wife throw away his mother's memories because he was too weak to say stop. His punishment isn't just poverty. It's the knowledge that he betrayed the only person who truly loved him. Teach leçon.
So, what is the lesson here?
It's simple but brutal. Do not mistake silence for weakness. Mathew represents the generation that built things with their hands. They listen more than they speak. They plan. They endure. When you push a good man into a corner, you don't get a fight. You get a strategy. The bad boy clause wasn't just a legal trick. It was a karma trap. Mathew gave them every chance to be decent. If they had treated him with kindness, they would have inherited everything eventually. But by trying to grab it now, they lost it forever. Patience is a weapon, and sometimes the loudest revenge is lived quietly, happily and far away from those who tried to break you. Mathew's smiling face with the broken picture frame. He narrator. Now, a question for you in the comments. If you were Mathew, would you have kicked them out, or would you have given Jason one last chance? Let me know below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of sweet revenge.